He was just the janitor, mopping floors in silence while the strongest men in the Navy trained. Nobody paid attention to him, until one SEAL recruit saw the tattoo on his neck. A mark so rare it only belonged to a ghost from the most classified missions in history. And that's when the room froze. The SEAL training gym was alive with energy that morning. Weights clanging, boots pounding, and sharp commands echoing off steel walls. Recruits strained through brutal sets of pull-ups while instructors barked corrections like gunfire. Amid all the sweat, noise, and testosterone, nobody paid attention to the quiet figure pushing a mop across the far end of the floor. The janitor looked ordinary enough. Gray coveralls, a faded navy cap pulled low over his brow, and a pair of scuffed boots that had clearly seen better days. His posture was slightly hunched, his limp barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. He moved slowly, methodically, as if the mop and bucket were his entire world. Most recruits didn't even glance at him. When they did, it was with a passing smirk or a dismissive look. A couple of the younger guys cracked jokes under their breath. Something about grandpa cleaning up after real men. The janitor didn't respond. He didn't flinch, didn't even glance their way. He just kept moving, cleaning under benches, wiping down the mats, humming softly to himself like he couldn't hear a thing. To them, he was invisible. Just an old man doing a job no one wanted. But if they had looked closer, at the way his hands moved steady as a surgeon's, at the faint scars peeking from under his sleeves, at the quiet authority in his posture, they might have sensed something different. Something that didn't fit, but nobody looked. Nobody cared. Because why would they? He was just the janitor. Just a tired old man mopping sweat from the floor while the next generation of warriors prepared for battle. And that's exactly how he wanted it. Because ghosts don't announce themselves. They wait until someone finally notices. It happened on a Tuesday morning, during the last hour of an intense workout. The recruits were sparring hard on the mats, muscles straining, sweat dripping into their eyes as instructors shouted corrections. The janitor worked quietly near the edge of the room, bent over as he scrubbed a stubborn stain. His gray coveralls hung loose, and for a moment, the collar slid to one side, revealing the skin at the base of his neck. That's when Mason, a 24-year-old recruit fresh from Budaslash's prep, noticed something. A dark mark etched into the old man's weathered skin. At first, Mason thought it was a faded anchor, maybe an old Navy tattoo like many veterans wore. But when the janitor straightened to wring out the mop, the full design came into view. It wasn't an anchor. It wasn't any tattoo Mason had ever seen outside of classified files. A black trident, sharp and unmistakable, curled around a winged skull. Beneath it, a single number, 0. Mason's chest tightened. He'd seen that mark once. In a briefing so secret they weren't even allowed to take notes. SEAL Team 0. The unit that officially didn't exist. The kind of men whose names were erased from history, whose missions were so black they made headlines vanish. Ghost operators. Myths. Legends whispered about in bars and secure rooms, but never confirmed. Mason stared, his pulse hammering. Could this really be him? This old man with a mop? No way. No chance. And yet, that tattoo wasn't something you faked. That ink meant something only a handful of men on the planet could understand. The janitor turned his head slightly, catching Mason's stare. His eyes, gray, cold, steady, locked on the young recruits. A quiet warning, a silent message. And Mason suddenly knew. This was no ordinary janitor. The moment Mason spoke, the gym fell silent. "Sir, that tattoo," he said carefully, his voice barely above a whisper. Heads turned. The rhythmic clanging of weights stopped. Even the instructors froze, their eyes snapping toward the old man in the corner. For a second, nothing happened. The janitor stood still, his mop handle resting against the bucket, water dripping onto the floor like a ticking clock. Slowly, he set the mop aside and straightened his back. For the first time, everyone saw him, really saw him. He pulled off his faded cap, revealing a head of short, silver hair, and then rolled his shoulders like a man shrugging off years of hiding. His posture was no longer hunched. It was iron straight, the kind of stance drilled into the bones of men who've seen war and lived to tell the untold. His eyes swept across the room, calm but sharp as steel. "You shouldn't know what that mark means," he said finally, his voice low and steady, cutting through the silence like a blade. Mason swallowed hard. "They told us. In prep training. Just rumors. We didn't think it was real." A faint smile touched the old man's lips, one that didn't reach his eyes. "Good," he said. "Means we did our job." The instructors exchanged uneasy glances. They knew now. That tattoo wasn't a myth. And the man standing before them wasn't a janitor. He was something else entirely. Something so far beyond their rank or pay grade that even the bravest recruits felt their stomachs tighten. For the first time since anyone could remember, the gym was quiet enough to hear a drop of sweat hit the mat. The old man adjusted his collar, picked up his mop again, and said one last thing before turning away. "Don't stare too long, kid. Some ghosts don't like the light." The old man didn't leave. Instead, he walked slowly to a bench near the wall and sat down, his mop leaning beside him like a rifle at rest. For a moment, nobody moved. The recruits glanced at the instructors, waiting for them to say something. But even they stayed quiet, their rigid stances betraying a mix of shock and respect. Finally, one of the instructors, Chief Daniels, stepped forward. "Sir," he said carefully, why are you here?" The old man looked up, his gray eyes calm. "Because even warriors need clean floors," he said dryly. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room, but they died quickly when he leaned forward, resting his scarred hands on his knees. "You kids think being a SEAL is about muscles, about being loud and fearless. It's not. It's about silence, about doing the impossible and then disappearing like it never happened." His voice wasn't loud, but every man in the room heard him like it was thunder. "You train for glory. You think about medals. Forget all that. The job's about one thing, bringing your brothers home, no matter what it costs you. And sometimes," his tone dropped, "you don't come back the same, or at all." The recruits listened like their lives depended on every word, because deep down they knew they did. Mason sat cross-legged on the mat, eyes locked on the old man. "Sir," he said quietly, "how do you live with everything you've seen?" The janitor's jaw tightened. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, finally, he said, "You don't live with it. You learn to carry it, and you pray it doesn't crush you." Nobody spoke after that. The silence wasn't awkward. It was reverent. They weren't looking at a janitor anymore. They were looking at a ghost who had walked through hell and come back sweeping floors. The gym was silent, heavy with the weight of what had just happened. The old man stood slowly, his knees creaking but his presence towering above everyone in the room. He reached for his mop and bucket as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. No fanfare, no grand speech, just a man returning to his work. But the recruits couldn't take their eyes off him. The legend they'd read whispers about, the ghost they thought was a myth, had been right there under their noses, scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans. As he began pushing the bucket toward the door, Chief Daniels moved first. He stood straight and snapped into a crisp salute. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The old man paused. For a moment, the years seemed to fall away, and what remained was the warrior beneath the gray hair and wrinkles. Slowly, deliberately, he turned and returned the salute. Not out of pride, but respect. One by one, every instructor followed. Then, like a wave, every single recruit stood, their heels clicking as they raised their hands high. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a drill. It was instinct, an acknowledgement of something far greater than rank or title. The old man gave them one last look. "Train hard," he said softly. "The fight's out there, not in here. And remember, real warriors don't need recognition. They just need to bring their brothers home." He pushed the bucket to the door, opened it, and walked into the bright afternoon sun. The door closed behind him with a quiet click, leaving the room in stunned silence. They never saw him again. But from that day on, every man in that gym carried his words like armor. Because some heroes don't live in stories. They walk among us, mops in hand, ghosts in plain sight. If this story inspired you, show your support, like, comment, and share it with others who value true heroes. Don't forget to subscribe to Unheard Heroes for more powerful untold stories.